I'm a new person. And I do things because I want to show God that even though that's not wrong, but I want to show that I want, by action, to show God that my mind is reprogrammed again. And I know that some of you, Armenian, especially Hayastantis and Bashkais, I don't know, do Bashkais drink a lot? Do they? No. Bashkais? No? Okay. Well, I know that in the Hayastansi world, drinking is the norm and it's the common. But unfortunately, our parents don't understand that our grandfathers and our fathers, the Hayastansis, when they were under the communist regime and they were working in factories, they had to blow off time as much as they can. So they snuck a bottle in, they drank, and they lived in cold countries, so drinking in a cold. So those were all things that were necessary. We're not in cold country, nor we live in a communist country there where we need to waste time during the day because we're going to get paid the same way. We live in a place where our minds need to be sharp. Alcohol has absolutely no value. And I know that most Hayastansis, you are going to be pressured into being this person and that person. And I encourage you to guys stand and say, hey, I am not you or your grandfather in a gentle way, if you don't want to die, right? Just say that, that's not me anymore. That's not me anymore. And I am a new person. One of the coolest things I've seen is going to, again, Osan's nephew's Ganung. And Kokon, what's the panin anmosa? Nenoin. Neno is your die-hard Hayastansi, like the seaweed is still on his back type of a guy, right? Like the boat just dropped him off. And he didn't drink. During the thing, he didn't drink. And I'll tell you what, no one dared to come to him and tell him, drink. You know what? He says, I don't drink. And he looked at them like that. I don't drink. I don't drink. And you can take that stand. And why do I bring the Hayastansi? Because it's the culture. It's difficult. I know that many people suffer in this. But you need to take a stand. Because sin is not going to enter heaven. And because of you being nice to these people, guess what? You're going to have to stand in front of God and be judged for. And we all have our cultural problems that we kind of, Satan puts a burden and makes us a slave to it. And Paul says, you are no longer a slave to these things, whatever your culture is burdening you in. He says, you are a free person. A person that is going after the righteousness, right thing for me in this world, for God's creation. And he says, because of that, it starts by, number one, change your thoughts. Change your thoughts. Clean this up. Don't get religious. Don't say, I believe it. But reprogram yourself by waking up every morning and say, I am a new creature. I am not my old me. I will not do those things. These feelings and these urges that I have, I will say no. And the Bible says, if you suffered, and we read this in Romans, if you suffered for a little while, and the suffering is, guys, not being persecuted by guns and things. The suffering that he's talking about is being able to say no to your urges because they're not the right thing for you. That's suffering, and you're gonna bite your nails, bite your hand, bite your tongue, bite your cheeks, and all that stuff. You're going to do all that stuff, but after you suffer for a little while, Paul says that your body is you're no longer going to be slave to your body, but it's going to be a slave of yours. That's powerful stuff. And its knowledge is very important. I asked you guys a question last week. I said, every time I drink water, I get nauseated. Has anyone have that problem? Haraj says he has that problem. So I researched it, Haraj. My problem started when the weather got warm, right? I usually don't drink cold water. I drink regular bottled water. So what's been happening is when I drink cold water, and Raj, this doesn't pertain to you, it's for humans only. It's not like half alien, half man, half. So when I start drinking cold water, what it does, it takes all the fat and freezes it and puts it right here. It gets very thick and you get the acid and you start getting nauseated. And that's all it was. Don't drink refrigerated cold water. Knowledge has set me free. Man, I love water. I'm pounding water right now, and I don't have that problem. Because when I don't drink water, I feel like, but knowledge has set me free. And Paul is saying that knowledge will set you free if you understand what your main cause of the problem is. And then he's going to illustrate the marriage, and we'll talk about that marriage. So, reprogram your mind, put it into action, and here's the third that we talked about. Instead of being slave to sin and serving your desires, serve righteousness. No middle ground. Serve righteousness, no middle ground, wholeheartedly. Third thing is, look, you're going to do an action in your life. Why don't you do an action that is the right action in your life? So clean up your mind, reprogram your mind, put what you've reprogrammed into action. You're with me?
Yep.
And now you're going to do something, right? Do the right thing. He says it's very simple. Now, I want some of you guys to kind of open for questions. Some of you guys to come back and forth about these three things that we've talked about, not the water and my puking problem. Yes. Anyone? Questions?
Rafi's here, science mission. She's got
Rafi.
a question.
You're talking about the rapture?
Yeah, we'll get to that later, Rafi. I don't want to talk about the rapture. I want to talk about reprogramming the mind. I want to talk about doing what the mind says, and I want to talk about, since you're going to do something, why don't you serve righteousness instead of yourself? No, Rafi. Next. Mary.
I would argue that the first attitude is the hardest, and you probably will fail at it 100.
And that's where most of us stop, Mary.
So 2 and 3 is smooth sailing after you got 1 down.
That's right. So if you can get 1 down, and really that's what Paul, remember how we started, when we talked about Paul, we said Paul, the reason is converted. Now Peter was born again. It took Peter to be born, to be rebirthed into this idea over and over again. And finally, at the end of his life, he writes 1st, 2nd Peter, and then we see that he gets it. Right? But when it comes to Paul, Paul asks the essential question. He sees God on his road to Damascus. And he asks an essential question. Who are you, Lord? Right? Remember that we talked about? He gets the answer, and his mind was reprogrammed, Mary, after that. And after that, he didn't have a problem with that. Even though his life was full of problems. In fact, even to a point where he goes to God and says, look, God, 3 times I've asked you to take this physical problem that I have away from me so I may proclaim your gospel better. And 3 times you said no. And you said your grace is sufficient for me. He goes, I'm going to take that. I could not do what Paul did. I would be like this to God. It's like, why are you doing this to me? Because his mind was reprogrammed. And he had the knowledge. The problem with some of us believers, our mind does not have the knowledge that it needs in order for it to work in the body part of our life. And we said that the mind is what controls the body. The body is the body can't feel pleasure. The body can't feel pain. The body is basically a vessel for the brain to control its back and forth. The sensors on your finger, when it's broken, sends it to the brain. If you're brain dead and you have a broken hand, what do you feel?